Thank you so much for listening. If you'd like to offer Dana, then please do go to justthiszen.org/giving. Your support really does make a huge difference. Thank you so much.
And welcome everyone to our day together. And thank you for offering yourselves and your homes and your particular rooms you're in as Zendos today. And I'm just taking you all in as I look at the screen, and I'm just moving on to the second one, just so I can feel I welcome you all in my heart. It's very beautiful to see you today. And really, we're taking part in an experiment, being online, which has been happening for about 4 years, but it follows hundreds of years of being together in person in this practice. And so there are some things about being online where it's helpful to think about how it was before we went online. And it gives us some idea of how we can conduct ourselves during the online practice. Firstly, the guidance in sitting is to keep your eyes gently open. It's not that you don't close them sometimes, but generally you keep your eyes just gently open, looking towards the floor, maybe at a 45-degree angle, just so that you can be aware of maybe of your knees, so you know you're sitting there, so that you're not going anywhere while you're sitting. You're gently present in the Zendo. And if you were in person, you would maybe facing the wall, or you would be in a row or in a circle, but looking down at towards the floor. You wouldn't be looking at people directly. So a suggestion I have is you either move your focus to the altar, which becomes the speaker during sitting, or you have the gallery view, but you look at the hinge at the bottom of your screen. So just as you would in an in-person Zendo, you're aware of people, but you're not focusing on them. So you can see gentle movements happening, but you're not focusing on them. And if you need to move at all to leave the room, perhaps if somebody comes to the door, please turn your camera off, and then when you return, turn it back on again. I often like to be reminded why I'm doing this practice, why I've come to a day. And Suzuki Roshi said, to feel your being here in this very moment is a very important practice. To feel or to be yourself at a certain time in a certain place, that is why we practice our way. And I find it really helpful to keep this awareness during the day, because my mind can be very tricky and I can forget why I'm here. So to feel your being here in this moment is a very important practice. And to support us in our practice today, we have a theme, the patience of ordinary things. And Maria, would you share the poem now, please? Thank you. The Patience of Ordinary Things by Pat Schneider. It is a kind of love, is it not? How the cup holds the tea, how the chair stands sturdy and foursquare, how the floor receives the bottoms of shoes or toes, how the soles of feet know where they're supposed to be, I've been thinking about the patience of ordinary things, how clothes wait respectfully in closets, and soap dries quietly in the dish, and towels drink the wet from the skin of the back, and the lovely repetition of stairs, and what is more generous than a window? I've been living with this poem this week, and I'm just living with my response to it in this very moment, and I wonder what your response to that is. My first response was to slow down and try to meet each of these things: a cup, a shoe, the soles of my feet, clothes, soap, stairs, and windows. So there was a kind of adjustment to something that I don't normally attend to, I take for granted. It was almost a kind of humbling. Oh, oh wow, yes, they're all there in my life all the time. And they're all there in your life too. It's very easy to be looking up and thinking about things we might be grateful for or that we appreciate. But what about the stairs and the floor? So I would invite you to attune to something in your room or some things in your room that are just there, but maybe you haven't looked at them closely recently. And just attune to that thing, that object. I've always remembered a phrase from T.S. Eliot, and I didn't know quite where it came from until I checked. There's a phrase I carry around: as a Chinese jar moves perpetually in its stillness. And I thought of this while I was preparing the talk, and I looked it up, and it comes from the Four Quartets. It says, only by the form, the pattern, can words or music reach the stillness, as a Chinese jar moves perpetually in its stillness. I don't know what that means, but I like it, and it offers me a kind of space that I can open into. We have such busy, busy minds, and I've been reading recently some letters from 1975 between the Zen teacher Sweng San and his student Ed. And it's quite a long correspondence. And I would say that Ed goes on about himself at great length. He has that very busy mind, very sincere mind, but they're long, long letters. And there's a lot of complaint in them about other people in the Sangha, the world, his practice. And Sweng San replies very graciously and at length. But in the last letter, he says, I want a short letter from you next time. You must go outside and ask the tree in front of the temple what the true way is. Then this tree will teach you. Don't write me anything else. Just tell me what the tree said to you. Just tell me what the tree said to you. So during your break and your lunchtime today, there's an opportunity to maybe go outside into the garden, to look at a flower, or to appreciate a tree. But also while you're sitting, to ask some of the objects around what they want to teach you the true way and what that is. And maybe feel the response from those things inside you. Tell me what the cup says to you. So there's an opportunity today to drop into this vast space you're sitting in your room with these objects, to rest in the immediate. Just rest in your space. You've got cups, a floor, a ceiling, some clothes. What more do we need? We can rest in the immediate as though it were infinity. To rest in the immediate as though it were infinity. So in a moment we're going to go into our first period of sitting, and I did say that you can, if you wish, you can have the altar on speaker view. We wanted to try to have a blank square today to represent people who are unable to be there with us, which is what we do when we're in person. But we can't do that because it would require the person who's not there to log on, or people who are not there to log on. So if you could also think of the altar as a space where people who can't be here today, or who will never be here, can be remembered, thought about, or appreciated. That could be another practice as well. And you may want to put the names of people who you love and who you want to remember on your own altar if you have one at home. So I'm now going to open the Zendo, and we will start our first period of sitting. Thank you very much. Welcome back, everyone. It's lovely to take you in again, looking at gallery view. Here we are, together. Let's just thread on to the second part of the talk by looking again at the poem. So Maria, would you share the poem again, please? I'll read it again. It is a kind of love, is it not? How the cup holds the tea, how the chair stands sturdy and foursquare, how the floor receives the bottoms of shoes or toes, how soles of feet know where they're supposed to be. I've been thinking about patience, of ordinary things, how clothes wait respectfully in closets, and soap dries quietly in the dish, and towels drink the wet from the skin of the back, and the lovely repetition of stairs. What is more generous than a window? Thank you. And I'm wondering how many cups your hands have held in your lifetime. I was thinking about this room I'm in here. Probably there wouldn't be room for all the cups that I've had the privilege to hold, and how many chairs I've sat in. It's amazing to think about that, what I've received from all of these things. And I think the words in the poem in some ways describe some essential aspects of practice: holding, receiving, respect, quiet, silence, repetition, and generous. And I think for me what they describe is the generous practice of all of these of all of these things that we often take for granted. I played a little bit with the poem in terms of thinking of it as a zendo. It is a kind of love, is it not? How the Jisha holds the incense, how the floor receives our feet during walking meditation. And what is more generous than a window? What is more generous than an altar? What is more generous than an altar? My mother loved beauty, and I live with a partner who appreciates beauty and wonder. And very often, if I was out with my mother, she would point out beautiful things to me. Isn't this beautiful? Can you see that? And that was my initiation into beauty and wonder. It was my training. I'm very grateful for that. Once when I was out for a walk with my son Ben, he said, "You talk a lot about beautiful things, don't you?" And I think there was an implied criticism in that. He'd had enough, probably. And I'm reminded of two, a student and a teacher who went walking. I think it was in 8th century China. And the student said to the teacher, pointed out something really beautiful. And the teacher said, "Yes, a pity to say so. Pity to say so." How interesting. So I'm celebrating my mother's love of beauty, and there's another side as well. A pity to say so. One of the poets she particularly loved was Rupert Brooke, who was a poet of the First World War. He died in 1915 of septicemia following a mosquito bite whilst aboard a French hospital ship off the island of Skyros in the Aegean, while on the way to the landings at Gallipoli. And the thing my mother used to particularly like was a poem called The Great Lover. And in the poem, he lists the things he loves, and she used to like hearing them read out. So I'm just going to read a few of these parts of the poem that she loved. "These I have loved, white plates and cups, clean gleaming, ringed with blue lines, and feathery, fairy dust. Wet roofs beneath the lamplight, and the strong crust of friendly bread, and many tasting food, rainbows, and the blue bitter smoke of wood, and radiant raindrops couching in cool flowers, and flowers themselves that sway through sunny hours, dreaming of moths that drink them under the moon. Then the cool kindliness of sheets that soon smooth away trouble, and the rough male kiss of blankets, grainy wood, live hair that is shining and free, blue massing clouds, the keen unpassioned beauty of a great machine, the good smell of old clothes, and other such, the comfortable smell of friendly fingers, hair's fragrance, and the musty reek that lingers about dead leaves and last year's ferns." I purposely put the poem in the middle of a page because when I was preparing the talk, I made lots of scribblings, and I also was tempted next to draw some things of these things and things that I could think of which related to the poem. So it will be available on Linktree and anything else that I refer to today. Flint once said that at the end of a retreat, Reb Anderson held up a cup, a perfectly integrated cup, and said, "This cup is already broken." So in each object we see, in each person we see, the brokenness is integral to it, to life. And I was enjoying just recently rewatching the film about cooking your life, featuring Ed Brown, the former Tenzo of Tassajara, and it's about cooking at Tassajara, and he's reflecting on some of the things that are in the kitchen, some of the objects. And he said, sincerity is the quality where your imperfections show. Sincerity is the quality where your imperfections show. He says, sin means without, and seri means wax. So without wax, sincerity, without covering up. And he's holding a teapot fondly in his hands, a metal teapot which has dents in it, large one for many, many people. And he says, this is a sincere teapot because it's not covering up its blemishes and imperfections. The lines in your face are actually part of your sincerity. As something or someone ages, we appreciate the lines, how something looks, and we see something real, we see something as it is. He says, in the course of life, you get banged up and tarnished, and it's partly for him at that moment, noticing that in teapots. He says, and people are not necessarily treating them very respectfully, carefully, just as we are not treating one another kindly and respectfully and carefully. And while he's holding this teapot in his hands, tears appear on his face. And he says, we were cooking in this small space, very small space, for 100 people. Somehow the thing that used to capture my attention in the kitchen, of all those things that were there, were these teapots. They had their place on the shelf. There was something about them that was just plump and bright and cheery, even though they were banged up. And they still seemed so willing to carry tea and serve the people who were using them. So I would think that if those teapots could do it, I can do it too. In all our brokenness, we can do it. Shortly before our most recent in-person day, we decided that we were going to move the chairs. We had a really good plan for a circle of chairs, which Jan had really carefully arranged. But we decided it wasn't going to work. The chairs were too far from the altar. So we had a relatively short time in which to rearrange these chairs. And Jan very quickly readjusted to a new situation very skillfully. And the temptation was, because we didn't have very much time, to drag the chairs around and get them in place so that people would, when they'd be coming and they needed to be ready. And I remembered this chapter from Not Always So, in which Suzuki Roshi talks about being in a zendo, and above him in the dining room, people were scraping chairs across the floor. And he wrote a whole chapter about it, which I'll read a little bit to you in a minute. So we paused for a moment and we decided that we would take 2 people to each chair and we would lift them carefully into place. And the temptation in our practice is to think that it begins when you arrive and you're settled and the bell rings. That's practice. And then at the end you go home and you're back to the same, the same way of being with things and people. But if you think of practice as a kind of training ground where you take the practice out into your life and you try it out and you see what's possible, not so that you can be a better person, but so you can live with more ease in a troubled world, and also more in a way of serving more effectively in a troubled world. So we caught ourselves in time not to drag the chairs across the floor, and it was actually a very beautiful practice. The chairs got placed on time. Our systems didn't get agitated by what we were doing, and the chairs and we were happy by the time they were all in place. So in this chapter, Suzuki Roshi says, to push the chairs across the floor is very convenient, but it will give us a lazy feeling. Of course, this kind of laziness is part of our culture, and it eventually causes us to fight with each other instead of respecting things. We want to use them for ourselves, and if it is difficult to use them, we want to conquer them. This kind of idea does not accord with the spirit of practice. I think we have a very good spirit here in the Zendo. I'm rather amazed at the spirit. But the next question is how to extend this spirit into your everyday life. You do it by respecting things and respecting each other, because when we respect things, we will find their true life. What is it to find the true life of a chair in the Friends Meeting House, or the true life of a vase or a cup or a tree? Great question for me in my practice. What is their true life? So about patience. Patience is integral to the poem, the patience of ordinary things. And I've looked up the definition for patience. It says the quality of being patient as the bearing of provocation, annoyance, misfortune or pain without complaint, loss of temper, irritation or the like. An ability to or willingness to suppress restlessness or annoyance when confronted with delay. And Trudy and I were talking about this morning, and there's often a word that's attached to being patient, which is waiting patiently. And I'm not sure in this poem whether the things described are actually waiting patiently. Trudy and I love watching tennis, and sometimes you will see a player waiting for a break point for maybe an hour, and then she'll get one, and the commentator will say, she's waited patiently for that, and she's got it. Or we say a heron is patient as it stands poised to spear a fish. Or in the kitchen, we're patiently waiting for something to happen. I remember when we were making butterscotch during one retreat, and you have to wait so long for it to happen, for it to brown, and you have like about 10 seconds to notice and then turn it off. You wait patiently. You have an end in sight. So I wonder whether these kind of descriptions of practice in this poem, these things, are actually waiting patiently. Suzuki Roshi explores this in one of his chapters in Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. But first, the definition of constancy from the same dictionary. Constancy is the quality of being unchanging or unwavering, as in purpose, love, or loyalty. Constancy is the quality of being unchanging or unwavering, as in purpose, love, or loyalty. And compare that with patience, an ability or willingness to suppress restlessness or annoyance when confronted with delay. So Suzuki Roshi says, I have always said you must be very patient if you want to understand Buddhism, but I have been seeking for a better word than patience. The usual translation of the Japanese word nin is patient, patience, but perhaps constancy is a better word. You must force yourself to be patient. But in constancy, there is no particular effort involved. There is only the unchanging ability to accept things as they are. People who know, if only intuitively, the state of emptiness always have the possibility of accepting things as they are. In everything they do, even though it may be very difficult, they will always be able to dissolve their problems by constancy. When I think of those two words, if I think of them as embodied places in me, with patience, I feel like I'm holding something until something happens, even though I may be well regulated and I'm not agitated, I'm not annoyed, but I'm waiting in some way for an action. With constancy, for me, there's a kind of opening out to something much vaster in myself. And just the word, for me, refreshes something that patience doesn't allow to happen. So when I think of the patience of ordinary things, I would want to change it to the constancy of ordinary things, because they're just doing what they're doing without any expectation. The floor, I can't imbue with an expectation, or a cup. They're just constant. And so I love if only intuitively, the possibility of that being a reality. It seems to me something like there's the relative, it's patience, and there's more the ultimate, there's constancy. Just returning to our earlier theme when we first met this morning about being here. I'd like to read you a poem. And I think it flows in an arc from earlier this morning when we were talking about being in the relative in our rooms and actually being there as though it was infinity. It's called The Little Duck. It's by Donald C. Babcock, 1947. Now we are ready to look at something pretty special. It is a duck riding the ocean 100 feet beyond the surf. She can rest while the Atlantic heaves because she rests in the Atlantic. Probably She doesn't know how large the ocean is, and neither do you. What does she do, I ask you? She sits down in it. She reposes in the immediate, as if it were infinity, which it is. She has made herself a part of the boundless, by easing herself into it just where it touches her. I'll read it again, and it will be on the link tree, the little duck. So if you can also imagine some sea swell, some seagulls, vast ocean, or a little duck in the ocean. Now we're ready to look at something pretty special. It is a duck riding the ocean 100 feet beyond the surf. She can rest while the Atlantic heaves, because she rests in the Atlantic. Probably she doesn't know how large the ocean is, and neither do you. And what does she do, I ask you? She sits down in it. She reposes in the immediate, as if it were infinity, which it is. She has made herself a part of the boundless, by easing herself into it just where it touches her. And what I'd wish for us is, may we find ourselves boundless by easing ourselves into it just where it touches us, just where this life is at this moment. That's where the entry to boundlessness is, in your room, with your things, with your floors and your ceilings. May you find yourself boundless by easing yourself into it just where it touches you. And I think I'll stop there. Thank you.